My name's Alex. I'm 31, and up until a few months ago, I still thought there was such a thing as unconditional family. That was before I got cornered in the hallway at my cousin Lauren's baby shower by my Aunt Denise, who looked me up and down like I'd just tracked mud across her white carpet. "We only invited you because we thought you'd bring an expensive gift," she said, with this tight little smirk. "Not because you're actually family." I just stood there, gift bag in hand, blinking at her like I'd misheard. But she didn't even flinch, just turned around and walked off, sipping her sparkling water like she'd just said something completely normal. And that's when something in me snapped, quietly. Not loud or dramatic like in the movies, more like the soft click of a lock turning. It wasn't the insult itself. Honestly, I'd heard worse from her over the years, buried under passive-aggressive jabs and backhanded compliments. It was the truth behind it, the quiet part she finally said out loud. All these years of me showing up, supporting every one of their birthdays, weddings, job promotions, bake sales, while they barely acknowledged my existence unless there was a check or favor involved. It all suddenly felt crystal clear. Let me rewind a bit. I was always the other kid. My mom, Denise's older sister, passed away when I was 12. Cancer. Fast and brutal. My dad wasn't in the picture, so I ended up bouncing around between foster care and distant relatives until I aged out. Aunt Denise offered to help out, but helping out, in her language, meant I was welcome for Thanksgiving if I brought a dessert and left before football. Meanwhile, she doted on Lauren like she was made of gold thread and sunshine. Don't get me wrong, Lauren's not awful. She's just oblivious. Spoiled. Sheltered. She thinks kindness is reposting quotes on Instagram about good vibes only, and occasionally tipping a barista 50 cents because she's feeling generous. The only reason I'd been around more lately is because I had finally started to find my footing. I'd spent my 20s working in tech, grinding, saving, moving from one tiny apartment to the next, eating instant ramen while quietly paying off my student loans. Then, about a year ago, things clicked. I got hired as a senior backend engineer at a small but rapidly growing startup, got stock options, a raise, and a six-figure bonus when we got acquired. Suddenly, I wasn't struggling. I wasn't scraping by. I wasn't the poor cousin they all politely ignored. I was useful. That's when they started calling. Aunt Denise reached out first, all syrupy concern. "We've missed you at family things, Alex," she said one day in a voicemail. "It's just not the same without you." That was the same week she casually mentioned that Lauren and her husband, Todd, were struggling to close on their new house. Rates were high, she explained. The baby was coming. Stress was mounting. And she was just so worried they wouldn't be able to raise a child in a stable environment. "We're only a few thousand short," she said gently. "But we know how hard you've worked and how generous your heart is." She ended the message with a laugh and a "no pressure, of course," as if it wasn't already bleeding guilt. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I told myself it was for the baby, not for them. And to be fair, I didn't write a check. I made an anonymous transfer through a mutual connection, $15,000 wired straight to a housing support fund their church was quietly managing for them. They never found out who donated. But the loan closed 2 days later. I never got a thank you. Now flash forward back to the baby shower. It was held at some rented white barn venue with string lights, an open mimosa bar, and a hired photographer who kept asking me to step just a little more to the left so I wouldn't block the real family in the group photos. I brought a carefully wrapped gift. Nothing flashy, just thoughtful. Handmade baby quilt, embroidered with the baby's name. They'd announced it early. And a gift card to a baby gear site tucked in. It wasn't extravagant, but it wasn't cheap either. Still, the second I walked in, I could feel it. The stares. The tight smiles. The "oh wow, you made it" reactions like I'd wandered in from the street. And then Denise pulled me aside and said it. "Not because you're actually family." After she walked away, I just stood there for a second, gift bag clutched in both hands, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't fully explain. Rage? No, not quite. It was more like this hollow ache that had finally grown tired of being ignored. I looked around at all the people laughing, sipping cucumber water, complimenting Lauren's bump like it was royalty. Nobody had noticed the exchange. Nobody ever noticed. That was my role. Quiet, generous, and conveniently forgettable. So I walked over to the gift table, set the bag down like nothing happened, then excused myself to the bathroom. Except I didn't go to the bathroom. I slipped out the side door, got into my car, and pulled out my phone. The mortgage fund was still managed by the same contact, an old friend from high school who worked at the church and handled the donor logistics. I shot him a quick message, told him there was a serious issue with the donation, and I needed it reversed immediately. I didn't go into details, he didn't ask. The money had been sitting unallocated in the reserve account. Apparently, they hadn't yet issued the final payment. I made sure it was retracted cleanly and legally. Then, I opened a folder on my phone. See, a few weeks ago, I'd been getting spammed with ads on Facebook from this sketchy boutique perfume brand. I clicked on it once, just out of curiosity, and suddenly got flooded with garbage. In an attempt to clean up the mess, I dug around in my app permissions and noticed something odd. My cousin Todd, Lauren's husband, was somehow linked to a few shady social accounts I recognized, one of which had been flagged for posting explicit content. I clicked through, and to my horror, found photos, nothing illegal, but very incriminating. Screenshots of flirty DMs, hotel reservations, even a selfie in a mirror I knew wasn't from his or Lauren's house. At the time, I didn't do anything. Honestly, I didn't care enough. Todd always gave me bad vibes. Too smooth, too fake handsome, always laughing too hard at his own jokes. I figured it wasn't my business. But now it was very much my business. I saved everything, screenshots, usernames, timestamps, organized into neat little PDFs. And then, with fingers surprisingly steady, I composed a short message. Nothing dramatic, just enough. I attached the documents and scheduled the email to go out to every single person on the guest list, the one Lauren had emailed weeks ago with the baby shower RSVP. I set the delivery time for 4:15 p.m., right after the cake was scheduled to be served. Then I put my phone down, turned the key in the ignition, and drove away. I didn't even look back at the stupid white barn glowing with fairy lights behind me. And that was just the beginning. I didn't even get halfway home before my phone started vibrating. The first few notifications were from Instagram, random cousins tagging me in stories from the party. I ignored them. Then came the texts. A couple from Lauren, one from an unknown number, and one from Denise, all within 2 minutes. I turned off notifications and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. If they wanted my attention, they could wait. I wasn't in the mood for fake apologies or gaslighting disguised as confusion. I stopped at this quiet little coffee shop near my apartment, ordered something warm just to hold, and sat by the window watching the world go on like nothing had just detonated behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Just calm. Numb, even. Like I'd finally finished a puzzle I didn't know I'd been solving for years. By the time I got home, my phone was overheating. 53 unread messages. 11 missed calls. Group chat notifications lighting up like wildfire. I let it sit there while I poured myself a glass of water and reheated leftovers. I wanted to read them in silence. No background noise, no TV, no music. Just me, the chaos, and the very expensive peace of mind I'd finally purchased for myself. The first voicemail was from Denise. "Alex, honey," she began, her voice brittle and strained like she was trying to keep it together. "There's been some sort of mistake. Someone sent out very inappropriate materials to everyone at the party, and they claim it came from you. I don't understand why you'd do that. Whatever this is, it's gone too far. You need to call me." The second one was worse. "Lauren," crying. I don't know what happened. I thought you liked Todd. Why would you ruin this day for me? For the baby? What did I ever do to you?" I actually laughed at that one. What did she ever do? She stood by and watched me get shoved to the outer ring of the family like some embarrassing distant relative, never once speaking up. She watched me be excluded, ignored, and silently volunteered as the family ATM when it was convenient. And now she wanted sympathy? Then came the texts. A roller coaster of denial, accusations, bargaining. Denise demanded I apologize immediately and threatened to speak to a lawyer. Todd texted once, "You messed with the wrong guy." I screenshotted it and moved on. Cousins were split, some confused, some horrified, a few quietly thanking me for finally exposing that creep. Then there was the group chat. The Right Family Moments group, normally used to coordinate potlucks and pretend like everyone got along. It had exploded. At first, they were all in disbelief. Then the screenshots started circulating again, this time with commentary. Aunt Joanne chimed in with, "I always knew something was off about Todd. Uncle Pete made an awkward joke that got instantly shot down. My favorite part was when Lauren's childhood best friend, Maya, jumped in to say she'd seen Todd with someone else 6 months ago, but didn't want to cause drama before the baby came. Maya wasn't even at the shower. She was just watching from the sidelines. By the time I finally said something, just a single message in the chat, no emojis, no fanfare, it was already chaos. All I wrote was, "Next time, invite me because I'm family, not because you expect a donation." And then I left the chat. 3 minutes later, someone made a new group without me. The next morning, I got a knock at my apartment door. I froze. It was way too early for packages. I hadn't ordered anything. I looked through the peephole, and for a second, I didn't recognize the woman standing there. Sunglasses, hoodie, arms crossed tightly. Then she pulled down the hood. Lauren. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes puffy, and her expression was something between shame and fury. I opened the door, but didn't say anything. "I need to talk to you," she said, voice flat. "I don't think you do," I replied. She blinked. "Alex, please. Just 5 minutes." I sighed and stepped back. She walked in like someone who didn't know where to sit, eventually perching on the edge of the armchair like she didn't want to touch anything. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. "He admitted it," she said softly. "All of it. The photos. The messages. Said it didn't mean anything and that he felt trapped lately. And then he had the nerve to ask if I still wanted to make it work for the baby." I raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. I told him to get out. "My mom's having a meltdown. Dad's staying at a motel to avoid the fallout. And Denise? She blames me for not seeing it sooner." She gave a bitter laugh. She actually said, "You should have kept a closer eye on your husband." "Classic," I said. She trailed off. "Did you really donate that money?" "For the house." I didn't answer at first, just stared at her, and then slowly nodded. "And you took it back?" "Yep." She nodded too, like she expected it. Then, after a moment, "I'm not mad at you." I tilted my head. "That was unexpected. You were right. About all of it. We used you. We smiled when you were useful and ignored you when you weren't. I guess she paused again, eyes flicking up to mine. "Never thought you'd fight back." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She stood, brushed imaginary lint off her jeans, and said, "Well, now I know better." She walked to the door, but turned before leaving. "You're not forgotten anymore, Alex. Trust me. They're all talking about you now." Then she was gone, and I just stood there, staring at the door, wondering if the ache I'd carried for years had finally lifted, or if I'd just learned to carry it differently. But the real reckoning? That hadn't even started yet. Because Denise wasn't done, and she was about to cross a line no one saw coming. It started 2 days later. I was going through my emails in the middle of a work call when a notification popped up, subject line, "Urgent, Church Housing Fund Inquiry." It was from the guy who managed the donations. He was polite, but clearly rattled. Apparently, someone had reached out claiming I had fraudulently interfered with a charitable donation meant for a young couple in need. They wanted my contact information for legal purposes. He didn't give it to them, obviously, but he felt I should know. My stomach dropped. It didn't take a genius to guess who it was. Denise had finally played her hand. I had expected passive-aggressive texts, maybe a Facebook rant written in all caps, but this was different. This was a move made by someone who had called in a favor. Someone who thought I'd roll over once she added the word legal. But I didn't panic. I reread the email twice, then pulled up my donation receipts, bank logs, and the original contract I'd signed when setting up the fund. The donation was anonymous, voluntary, and, most importantly, revocable until dispersed, which it hadn't been because they were dragging their feet, waiting for additional pledges. My retraction had been processed properly. No rules broken. No fraud. Just someone unhappy that the golden goose flew the coop. Still, I forwarded everything to a friend of mine, Harper, a contract attorney I'd met through work. She called me back 5 minutes later, laughing. "Let me guess. Overbearing family member throwing legal terms around like candy," she said. "You could say that. Well, unless you sign something I haven't seen, you're fine. This isn't even a civil issue. It's just messy drama wrapped in entitlement." "Sounds about right." She paused, then said, "You know, if they push this, I can draft a cease and desist. Shut it down clean." I told her I'd wait. I wasn't interested in lawsuits or letters yet. I wanted to give them enough rope first. But then Denise got bold. She posted a long-winded Facebook status the next day. It didn't mention my name, but it might as well have. Something about how certain family members think money gives them the right to humiliate and hurt others, how real generosity isn't conditional, and how God sees what's in people's hearts, even when their bank accounts are full. It was textbook Denise. Performative, vague enough to maintain plausible deniability, but direct enough for everyone to know exactly who she meant. And the comments? Oh, they poured in. You don't deserve this, Denise. Some people never grow up. Sending you love and prayers. But there were a few outliers. Wait, is this about the shower? Didn't Todd, cheat? Didn't someone donate money for their house and then pull it after being insulted? The cracks were showing. Lauren hadn't commented. Neither had Todd. They'd gone radio silent, probably too embarrassed to say anything. But Denise? She doubled down. She messaged me directly that evening. The tone was sickeningly sweet. Alex, honey, I think we've all had some misunderstandings lately. I know things were said in the heat of the moment, and I'd hate for this rift to grow. Family means forgiveness. Why don't we meet for coffee this week and clear the air? I stared at it for a long time. No apology. No ownership. Just spin. An invitation to rug sweep everything she said, everything she did, and pretend like I hadn't just been accused of fraud. So I wrote back. You called me not real family, in a hallway surrounded by people who pretended not to hear. I donated more to Lauren's future than anyone else in that room. You embarrassed me. You used me. And now that people are asking questions, you want coffee? You don't want to clear the air, Denise. You want damage control. No thanks. I didn't send it right away. I sat with it, rewrote it twice, then finally hit send. She didn't reply. Instead, she tried to get ahead of me. That weekend, there was another family gathering, an impromptu brunch organized by Denise, just for healing and togetherness. I wasn't invited, but someone live-streamed part of it on Facebook. It was mostly harmless, people milling about, clinking glasses, and laughing too loudly, until Denise stood up and made a toast. To the people who actually show up. To those who give love, not just money. There were a few raised glasses, a few awkward smiles. But then, someone else spoke. Off camera. I recognized the voice immediately. Lauren, she said. You know, Mom, maybe if we'd spent less time pretending and more time actually being decent to people, none of this would have happened. The video cut out there, but the comments lit up. I got a text from Lauren later that night. No preamble. I moved out. Todd's staying with a friend. I'm staying with Maya for now. Mom's furious. Dad's pretending he's neutral, but told me he was proud of me when she wasn't looking. I stared at the message for a long time. I hadn't expected that. Not from her. Then came the kicker. She still doesn't get it. Still thinks this is about money. I told her it was about respect. She said, Alex was never supposed to have power in this family. He was supposed to be grateful. That last part hit me harder than I expected. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed everything I'd spent years wondering. They didn't hate me. They just expected me to stay small. Now I wasn't. And they couldn't stand it. The thing is, Denise wasn't done. And I knew it. I could feel it. Because when narcissists lose control, they don't apologize. They escalate. And that escalation was coming faster than I thought. Denise didn't come at me directly after the brunch fallout. She went quiet, which honestly felt more ominous than any of her passive-aggressive monologues. I knew that silence wasn't peace. It was planning. People like her don't retreat, they regroup. Sure enough, 3 days later, I got an email from a reporter at a local community blog, one of those lifestyle outlets that reports on weddings, charity drives, and suburban gossip. The subject line was, clarification regarding the Right Family Housing Fund. Apparently, Denise had pitched them a human interest story. She painted herself as the organizer of a successful family fundraiser to help her pregnant daughter and son-in-law get their first home. Except, according to the reporter, there was now a complication involving a withdrawn donation that she wanted included for transparency. That's when it clicked. Denise was trying to rewrite the narrative before it slipped completely out of her hands. She knew the screenshots had been shared. She knew whispers were spreading about Todd. She knew I was gaining sympathy. So she tried to reframe the story. They were victims of betrayal. I wasn't a betrayed relative. I was a bitter saboteur. And she was the doting matriarch who never stopped trying to keep the family together. I almost laughed. I replied to the reporter with 3 things. A detailed timeline of the donation, including the original request, transfer confirmation, and revocation, with receipts. The full transcript of the voicemail Denise left when she found out about the affair leak, where she said, and I quote, "You just destroyed everything we built for this family, you little ingrate." And a final note that said, "If you want a real story, I'll talk. But you better be ready to hear the whole thing." They called me within the hour. I told them everything. The years of being excluded unless I was useful. The $15,000 they expected me to give without question. The not real family insult. The buried affair. The fake Facebook sermons. Every single betrayal. The journalist, young, sharp, and clearly smelling viral content, asked if I had more proof. I did. So I gave it. A week later, the article went live. Gift horse or scapegoat? The cousin who funded, then exposed, a family's picture-perfect lie. It was brutal, but honest. It didn't name everyone, but it named enough. Denise was identified as a maternal aunt, Lauren as a now-separated expectant mother, and Todd as a former marketing consultant currently facing allegations of infidelity. The quotes hit hard. The screenshots were blurred but recognizable. The writer pulled no punches. The piece ended with a line I didn't even remember saying during the interview, but it stuck with people. They expected me to keep giving because I never said no. Well, I just did. And now they finally heard me. Within hours, the post spread. Local Facebook groups picked it up. Family friends shared it with captions like, "Wow, I had no idea," and "Good on him for standing up for himself." I got dozens of messages, some from old coworkers, others from high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. Even people I barely knew reached out to say they'd experienced the same kind of conditional love from relatives. But the real chaos? That happened behind closed doors. Denise went nuclear. I didn't see it firsthand, but I heard about it through Lauren. She called me 2 days after the article dropped, voice equal parts horrified and amused. "Mom called the paper and demanded they retract everything," she said. "Told them she'd sue for defamation." "What did they say?" She said the editor laughed, then hung up. I couldn't stop smiling. Lauren had moved in with Maya full-time. She filed for separation from Todd, who, get this, tried to get back into her good graces by claiming the article was fake. When she refused, he started blaming me for ruining his career, even though he hadn't held a steady job in 8 months. Apparently, one of his old clients recognized his photo from the article and pulled their contract. Denise tried to salvage what little reputation she had left by hosting a healing circle at the community center. 6 people showed up. Half of them were there for the free cookies. The other half left halfway through when she started crying about being betrayed by blood. She called my dad, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, and told him I was tearing the family apart for revenge. He called me. I let it go to voicemail. Then I texted him, "If you cared about family, you would have shown up 20 years ago. Don't start now." He never responded. A few days later, the fallout reached its peak. Denise posted a final, desperate Facebook status. "I'm taking a break from social media. Too much toxicity. I wish people knew the full story, but apparently it's more fun to tear someone down than to build anyone up." She deleted her account 24 hours later. The silence was deafening, and honestly, peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was orbiting their world, waiting to be invited in. I wasn't waiting for someone to acknowledge me, or validate me, or decide I'd done enough to be considered family. I was family, just not theirs. Not anymore. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name and a single sentence. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll come to the baby's first birthday." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was from Lauren. And you know what? I didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I folded it neatly, tucked it into a drawer, and went for a walk. The air was cool, the sun low, and for the first time in years, I felt completely untethered. No guilt. No weight. No what-ifs. Just freedom. Sometimes, burning a bridge isn't cruelty, it's closure. And when I lit that match, I wasn't walking away from family. I was walking toward peace.